Good day, everyone. This is week 1 still on ideation, but this is part 2. You should have already done part 1. I guess that's obvious, but do part 1 first. You can start your homework off of part 1 as well. But here's part 2, the completion, the last part of ideation. This too should be reviewed prior to you coming to the ideation class. So let's get on with it. So, the next thing you want to know is who the buyer is. I use that term a lot, and I gotta, I guess, explain myself, because if I just go on and use that term, I may lose you. Markets are made up of buyers, people who have this problem you're going to solve, either in public life or within a business. So I call them buyers. These are the people that make the buying decision for the solution that you're going to offer to them to solve the problem that they have. So who is your ideal buyer? Now, it's not by name of people or a list of them or a list of companies that might have it. Within a company, it's a position held by someone in the business, like the CFO or the head of engineering or the head of marketing or the CEO himself or herself. Then go on, whoever it is, go on to say, how do they buy? Where do they buy? Do they buy online? Do they buy from preferred suppliers in a distribution channel? Do they buy online? How do they buy? How do they make buying decisions? If you're selling at an enterprise level or to any reasonably sized company, you're going to run into such obstacles as approvals by budget committees, or the next level of management above you, because the purchase price is so high, needs to be the second signator on the contract. So you need to know who's going to make the buying decision and how that decision is made. You also want to know who influences their decision. People do some research on what it is you're going to offer them. Or where do they go? Where do they find information? Are they reading trade magazines? Are they members of associations and call up people within it to see if they've bought what you've got? Or what do they think of this? And so they're going to check you out. Ask them, how do they make their buying decisions? How do they find out about whether or not they should buy it or not? How much would they be willing to pay as well? You need to ask them that. Now, you're going to figure it out as to what you think it needs to be. You're going to figure out if it's a price that would be competitive in the marketplace. You're going to try to maximize what you could get in terms of the price. But later on, you're going to check this out. And then just briefly describe what your revenue model would be. A revenue model, at this point, over the top of the thumb, what are you going to charge? What is it basically going to cost for you to build it? Is it a 3 or 4 to 1 ratio? That level of understanding, to say to yourself, my revenue model is probably going to work because I'm going to have a huge gross profit. That's about as far as you need to go. But it's important to figure out all you can about the buyer. You want to know the buyer is just as good as you know most of your friends. So, the decisions that are made by the buyer, you really got to go into depth in. Who all is involved in making the decision, as I said earlier. Another department that often gets involved is purchasing. God, you'll love working with purchasing departments who don't give a darn about what the solution is. They just want the best price. Well, you're going to deal with them. How well are the buyers educated on what it is you're talking about? You may have a buyer who you need to explain a whole lot of detail to, hopefully not so much that it takes you so much time to make a sale, turning it into a missionary kind of experience rather than a sale to an informed person. You need to know that before you start this whole thing, because that could have a great deal of bearing in your cost of marketing and sales. What's the length? What do you think will be the length of the sales cycle? What would be typical? when you've talked to the buyer and learned about their buying habits, you're going to come to realize, well, is this going to be one of those deals where they're going to want a trial program for 3 to 6 months, and after that goes to a budget committee, and then we decide how we're going to roll it out. We usually do this in phases, and on and on and on. You wind up with a 6 to 9 month sales cycle. Well, of course, buying online, the sales cycle is 5 minutes, but to cash, I mean, you get a credit card. So those are the two ends of the extreme, spectrum of lengths of sales cycles. But you got to know what it is, and you got to know, based on how they buy, whether you're going to go at them as a direct sales force, or are you going to have to work through others through an indirect sales channel of some kind, through distributors or dealers or value-added servicers and remarketers, and on and on and on. But as you enter this market, you have to create awareness. So how do you become top of mind remembrance? That is, buyers will recognize and remember you when they've read your material and know about your website, and you've called upon them, and they hopefully tell others that what you have offered and the way you solve the problem is a memorable event for them. That's going to be important for referrals and testimonials later. So, understanding the buyer is really part of the market question, but you want to go on to say, how big is the market? How big in number of people? How big in revenue opportunity? Is it growing? Is it declining? Is it flat? Are there other related markets you could be in with your solution, but you're going to focus on one for now, hopefully, instead of try 2 or 3 at once, which would be a death blow if you did. So how has the market changed in a couple of years, and how will it change in the next 2 or 3 or so? In other words, you're going to show the velocity of the market. You're going to explain what are the major trends that drive it. What does the ecosystem of this market look like? Who all the players are? You might even want to draw a picture of it. So you want to know, after all of this, is there a future growth for solving this problem? And what is driving the need for it? When you're dealing in a market that is going through great flux, like the banking industry obviously is right now, and many others will, as we enter a whole new era of federal government administration, a lot of things are going to change with respect to how businesses will thrive. So those are examples of trends. The deregulation of banking and the reduction of taxes to businesses and things like that are going to change how they view buying and their buying power. Understand those things. There could be technological changes that drive this, new innovations that are coming that no one else knows about. But you got to add this all up eventually. How many buyers do you think there are? And do you think they will pay? Now, these are things you're going to check out in market surveys later. At the point of ideation, you're going to just declare it. You may have talked to a few people. Later on, we'll do a deep dive in market research to validate all this. Then comes the competition, because you want to know if you can win in this market. So what makes your offering unique? We talked about that earlier. Who are your top direct competitors? Now let me explain a minute what a competitor is, so you're not confused. A competitor is anyone else that is solving the problem or problems that you are solving. They could be doing it in an entirely different way, different technology or different approach, or different integration of other related solutions. Whatever it is, if they're solving the problem you're trying to solve, no matter how they're doing it, they are a competitor, and you're going to meet them in the marketplace one way or another. That's what you want to know. Don't ever get caught in the you don't ever get caught saying you don't have a competitor because nobody does what I do. Well, I have to tell you, there's always one competitor. That competitor is the status quo, the way things are right now. Whatever your solution is, whether it's solving a problem or grasping a new opportunity, it's got to move them, your solution has got to move them off the dime from whatever they're doing now to what it is you're going to offer. That's a change in inertia, and sometimes it's very difficult. You need to understand that. So you always have a competitor. Start with the status quo, and then anybody else who thinks they're going to solve this problem better than you. So, what indirect competition exists? Those competitors that have many other related solutions, and oh, by the way, solve some or all of what you're trying to solve as well. What is unique about your approach? Now this one, what this uniqueness is, now I'm talking about your solution stacked up to all your competitors. Feature by major feature by major feature. A comparison. We'll talk about later on a competitive matrix and things like that, or techniques to visualize what your uniqueness is. And from that, you then could, of course, summarize what your competitive advantage is. All this competitive analysis has got to boil down to a couple of things. What actions am I going to take to overcome the competition? And what is there about my solution that is better than theirs? So I can feature that in my marketing and sales programs. That's what understanding the competition is all about. So let's talk about making money, the fifth question. Earlier we talked about what is your revenue model. You can actually answer that one here instead of the previous question. I cited this, but this is over the top of the thumb. This is not to go do some financial pro forma forecast at this point in the process. Don't take the time. Over the top of your thumb, determine the price, do your best guess, I shouldn't say guess, do your best estimate of what it will cost you to deliver your solution. If it's a product, it's the cost of goods sold. In other words, the bill of materials of all the parts plus labor, per unit. And if it's a service, it's what does it cost in humans to provide the service? It's labor cost. Whatever those are, add them up per unit sale, subtract it from what you're selling it for. And if you got a gross profit, that is, when you subtract the cost of the product or service from the revenue for it, you've got a 3-to-1 difference or greater. If you've got a 2-to-1 difference, you still might be okay, but it's going to be a little bit of a stretch. Depends on what industry you're in. So what will you charge for your product? Of course, you would have to have figured that out, or your service. What will it cost, as I said, your profit margin, and you'll know if you'll be ultimately be profitable, because you'll have a budget underneath gross profit that you'll also have to subtract, but that's an exercise for later. And if you are profitable, then you will have positive cash flow, and your cash will accumulate, and you would get rich. At least you hope so. And we're going to try to help you get there. So let me paint the big picture for you here. This is a depiction of the story you would tell about your business if you had it all figured out. And on one axis we got completeness, and on another axis we got cohesiveness. In other words, how all this hangs together. And that improves as completeness and cohesiveness increases. And now we just got through talking about the problem and the solution at a very high level, and the market, and some things about the competition, and a little bit of financial stuff. Over very high level. This exercise ought to be written in about 2.5 pages, half a page for each answer. We're going to go back later and go in a lot more depth along for each of these elements up the ladder here. So if you look at this, if you tell a story about your business to someone, and they want to know your complete business in about 10 minutes, you would say, here's the problem I solve, and you explain it in a really succinct and simple and compelling way. And my solution for it is an excitingly and innovative and brilliant solution. It's innovative. No one else has thought of this. And I'm dealing with a market that's very attractive. It's large and growing. I know the buyers, and I've validated that they have this problem that I described to you. I know who else is in the market because I'm going to compete with them. I know their strengths, I know their weaknesses, I know how I'm going to win. And I could tell you about that and will. And that here's the product that I'm going to bring to the market and how it provides the value that is needed in order to solve the problem that these buyers have. And it's differentiated. There's a high barrier to entry. No one else can do this because they have it protected, perhaps. Now, with that product, here's the marketing plan about creating awareness and generating leads. Here are the sales channels and where I am with the pipeline for those sales if I'm that far along, and what results I'm starting to see. And then describing the management team that is running this company and how they're committed and successful and why they're the right people to be running this business. And close it out with the financial forecast, showing profit and cash flow and maybe ultimately your best shot at what the value of your company might be down the road. That would be something investors would want to know. And if you're going to talk to investors, you're then going to have to explain to them why this is a great investment to make and what you're selling them in terms of equity in your company and what return could be possible. Never committing a darn thing, however. But this is a complete story of your business. So let's move on. Okay, that's it for part 2, and that also completes the entire presentation for ideation. So your next steps are as follows. Be ready to discuss the entrepreneur assessment and preparation test that you've already provided to your instructor. Be prepared to also discuss your business objectives. You'll be asked about that. We want to know what you're trying to achieve so we can guide you the right way. And you should start work on your ideation summary template. For your next session in week 2, you should have completed the the idea summary template and the ideation decision questions template, and send them to your instructor through the facilities that have been provided to you. So you provide these to your mentor so he or she can review them and make comments and, quite frankly, be ready for you in the next session. And you'll discuss all of this in your next mentoring session. You will also see these instructions highlighted in the week 2 preparation presentation, which you should review prior to going into week 2. That's it. The instructor contact information is Innovation Center at faytech.edu, or phone them at 919-522-0722. With all of this, you should be prepared for the class that's coming up and do the right things in terms of your homework that will be due for week 2. Have a good day.